Look, man, I'm not leaving at 3. I'm here for the entire episode of Eternally Bored.
Which ends at 3.
It ends at 3, but I'm going to stay beyond that. Oh, welcome to Eternally Bored. I'm Charles Washington, your host, as always, here with the wonderful co-host,
Trey Chambers.
And special guest,
Rabbi Gideon Estes.
Yes, we finally got him here. So, little preamble to this. This is our 15th episode, right?
Yep.
This was originally planned as our third or fourth episode.
That early? Okay.
Yes, this is our third or fourth episode. However, you might not know this, Gideon. Rabbis are rather busy.
You don't say.
Yes. So after a while, we finally got him in. So, it's glad to see you here today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, he's required for our religious discussion to be whole. Therefore, you could call it our holiest podcast.
So, let's see what we're working with here. But anyways, like I said, I guess we can do our quick, short introduction. I'm Charles Washington. I basically run the local gaming group, one of the local gaming groups in Houston.
Trey Chambers, I'm a game designer and teacher and overall game fanatic, and I just joined a cult that I'll be talking about at the end of the episode.
I'm Gideon Estes. I'm a rabbi at a congregation in West Houston, and I frequent gaming groups that these guys help host, and have been gaming for most of my life.
All right. Well, actually, since this is a religion podcast, I guess we should talk about our own religious backgrounds. Charles, what is yours?
I am a Baptist. Basically non-practicing Baptist at the moment, but I do follow some of the tenets of being a Baptist. I don't drink alcohol, and I've never been drunk, which most Baptists don't even follow themselves.
Well, some do.
Some do, yes. Some do.
Cool. And I'm a non-denominational Christian. I've been to many different sects of Christianity over my life, but non-denominational just seems like, I don't know, appeals to me the most. But yeah, basically, general Protestant, I guess, is the best way to put it. All right, great. So,
Wait.
well, you call yourself a rabbi, but yeah,
there are different
there are
denominations.
different. Go ahead.
So I'm a conservative rabbi, and that is my denomination. And grew up Reform, but since college, I've identified with the conservative movement. Which
Are there
is kind of
also
the middle stream of Judaism?
Are there subgenres of conservative? As
Not
well,
really.
Or it's just kind of middle of the road.
Yeah. Orthodoxy tends to have a lot more subdivisions. Like, there's a myriad of practice, probably a little left of center, probably on some things some right of center, but for the most part left of center within the wide camp of conservative Judaism. But I keep kosher, I observe the Sabbath. So.
And what is, for those of us who don't know, like, there's Reform and there's Orthodox. Orthodox, I guess they try to follow everything to the letter.
The major streams of American Judaism, quick aside here, you have Reform Judaism, which is generally the most liberal denominations, which puts a lot of stress on the values of kind of ethical monotheism and has a lot more of self-autonomy and self-choice, doesn't necessarily find Jewish law to be binding. Then you have my denomination, which considers Jewish law to be binding, but we understand the constant dynamic and evolving nature of Jewish law. I kind of summarize it for Christian friends. It's kind of like Jewish Episcopalianism. To kind of get it kind of loosely, it's an imperfect comparison. And then Orthodoxy tends to be a more strict kind of construction of Jewish law. They felt that both were revealed both the Old Torah and Torah were revealed at Sinai. Those are places where if you go, men and women are separated during worship. And then you have the ultra-Orthodox and Hasidim and things like that. Those are the people you see in like kind of black and white clothing that are more visually kind of outwardly Jewish.
Okay, very cool. So today we're obviously talking about religion and board games. And how have board games portrayed your religion, or have you played any games that portrayed Judaism?
So, for the most part, Judaism isn't necessarily portrayed in a lot of games. probably
Something with a mass marketing appeal.
yeah. Though there are a lot of like Jewish edition themed games. So like for example, there's Apples to Apples Jewish edition.
Did not
There's
know that.
Taboo Jewish edition, which like I like, or there's like the Jew Pack in Cards Against Humanity, which when playing with other Jews, it's a lot of fun because there's a lot of inside jokes, and
Awkward when paying with non-Jews.
so sometimes so fun. Like I have also like the Jewish pack and also the Christian pack for Flux, and so that was kind of fun to have like kind of the.
But you have to play Flux.
I did it early in my life before I kind of got to know you guys as much, and plus,
I enjoy Flux.
one thing that I will also share is that for my religion, there are certain restrictions that I can't do on Saturdays. So I look for board games that I can play on Saturdays that I'm like that religion kind of helps shape for me. So that's another cool category of religion and things for me personally, which is that games I can actually play on the Sabbath. And
What would be an example of a
adaptations.
game you cannot play on the Sabbath?
Pictionary,
Because you can't draw,
because you can't write.
can't write. Got it. So it's
And or any kind of game that had like electronic
categories.
Categories can't play.
No Alchemist?
No,
Wait, can't you use the app for Alchemist?
no, because you're not supposed
It's
to.
electronic.
Oh.
You don't
Yeah.
use
You
electronics.
can
things like that.
elect not to use the app for electronics and do it manually, but then you have to have a fifth player or some player just doing the board, which would be
Or
absolutely terrible.
Best decision: elect not to play Alchemist.
That's what I do.
I will reach across this tape anyway.
Religious episode, Charles Religion. So something you mentioned earlier segued into something I want to talk about, which is religious rethemes on games. How does our panel feel about that? Charles, we'll start with you.
Well, when it came to the point of categorizing the game, I would usually just throw rethemes sort of under the bus. Like, I don't consider them to be anything more than a additional marketing grab for the same game. So they're the exact same edition. Sometimes, such as the Cards Against Humanity, you can just throw it in and no one would be the wiser, except they wouldn't get exactly the humor, or, in the non-secular version, something like Codenames Disney or Codenames Marvel. I mean, you can play these games, you can play regular Codenames with these games, but they're obviously going to get in places that the regular edition of the game would not be able to make or bring new eyes to it. And I think that's good overall, because I think good game systems need to flourish in multiple ways. So, but as far as considering them their own game,
So I think that there's sometimes a gray area though. So like what I was thinking about games for today's podcast is one of the first kind of games I went out and bought was Settlers of Canaan, or Canaan, I guess as some might say, which is nowhere near as good of a game as Settlers of Catan, but it's not exactly a complete like retheming. Like clearly they licensed and probably paid the licensing for it, but it's a fixed board. But they added certain things to kind of show the religious aspects of it. So they added a idea of building stones for Jerusalem, where the person who completed the most stones would get some victory points. And approximately on this like historic map of ancient Canaan, kind of the time of the conquest of Joshua, is a spot that's kind of close to where the Galilee is, where Jesus kind of comes from, is some Nazareth, is a copper space that you can give you the resource of your choice.
Oh.
It
Miracles
was,
on the board.
it was produced by
Catholic
by
concessions.
Cactus Games, fundamentalist Christian group, I think, out of North Carolina, if I remember correctly.
So even though it's about the Jewish settlement of Jerusalem, it's through the Christian lens, basically.
Yeah,
Okay, interesting.
but like it was like a retheming, but it was not a straight reskinning. It was like an adaptation of it, as opposed to like some of the other religious games, which I was looking some things in my closet at the synagogue, which were
donated, right?
yes, I didn't buy these.
Okay.
That you have these Jewish games that are basically Jewish religious versions of kind of classics. So you have Mitzvah Land, which was basically Candyland, but designed for kids and has like pictures and things depicting the stuff for various mitzvot, which is the Jewish commandments, and then another one which was like the mitzvah theme park kind of idea, which is basically taking like, it was a Chutes and Ladders game that had like a Jewish skinning of it.
Things you probably didn't know existed until you listened to this podcast.
And
Mitzvah Land.
But you know, there's also a many religions. Many religions have a version of Monopoly as well.
Yeah,
Because-
that I'm not surprised by. Because everything has a version of Monopoly.
Hey man, there are some things that don't. There's some alien civilizations out there that don't yet have Monopoly, but I'm sure as soon as we get
You
there,
can
we will.
you can actually get a custom version of Monopoly made. I'm pretty sure you can like go to a website and input whatever pictures you want and name the spots whatever you want. Why would anyone ever do this? I don't know. I feel like people like the idea of Monopoly more than the game of Monopoly.
Well, I have a question for you, Trey. Like, you know, we talk about how have games portrayed religion. When you're playing games or when you're even designing games, is that an aspect that you want to integrate into your games, or if you're playing a game, is it something that you really notice?
Well, yeah, you know, pretty much it's mostly just window dressing because, you know, religion is a spiritual thing, and you can't to incorporate a spiritual experience into a game is very difficult. So a lot of times it just is a theme, or is like the most common place you'll see it outside of like just religious themed games is like a Civ game, right? If you're doing a Civ game, you're gonna have religions, and they're basically they can't really incorporate religion more than just like giving it certain parameters, like you discover Christianity and it gives you this bonus, or you discover Islam and it gives you this bonus, and it's just very, very abstract. So I think if you're doing a Civ game, you almost have to incorporate religion because it's such a big part of humanity, but at the same time, it's really hard to really incorporate religion into a game, I think.
Well, in the Civ games that I've played, I've noticed they sort of incorporated into like the traits of the people of the area. So you might have, you know, someone who's much better at expansion in a certain way, or that you can establish a power base of a church and from there rally more troops in order to move forward once you've established, you know, that religious base. So more of a bonus, but you know, like a fortress type of deal. But
yeah, I'd like to design. I mean, I have some ideas for a Civ game that I'd like to develop one day, and I have some ideas on how to put religion into it, which I think would be a different take on it. But I mean, it's difficult because, you know, religion is such a complicated subject, and you know.
But I think it's interesting as so being the practitioner of a minority religion is it's always interesting to go and like look at games when there is religion within it, like as an aspect. Like I was thinking to myself, an example where I think it's an interesting element is like in Carcassonne, of where you have like the monastery, and so you have it, and like my friends, like I would tend to go, but my friends would tend to point out to me like when I would play for that kind of strategy of having a lot of those buildings because of the fact that I'm religious and a religious professional, so it'd always be joking and a lot of fun. But it's very interesting to me is that as a minority religion, that whenever religion is especially for European design games, it's always a church, and it's very rare that you see a religion that is not the majority religion. If it's done, like it's always church and it's almost always a Christian focus. So I did have some fun looking at other religious games and finding that there's not just Laser Mitzvah Land, but I learned that there's the 5 Pillars game, which teaches you the 5 main religious aspects of Islam.
And the other way, I guess, games will incorporate it, they'll just make it like a faction. Like there are games like the coin game, some of them have religious factions, and the Here I Stand and Maria and forget the other one. But those kinds of games will often have like different religious factions, and sometimes they'll be sort of aligned with each other, and sometimes they'll be at odds with each other. But again, it's either historical or abstract or both. So it's, you know.
so maybe you've paid more attention than me, but you know, have you ever found any like offensive representations in any of the games that you've seen?
Were there any cards in the Cards Against Humanity that you were
That
like,
was-
that's too far?
There's sometimes there are a couple a little bit, but at the same time, like for that one is I know that the vast majority of the designers are all Jews, so
And you kind of know what you're getting into when
so
you're
I
playing
kind of
Cards
like that
Against
one.
Humanity.
And actually,
From the
I've
makers.
I've had a good time sometimes playing with colleagues. That game, it was an interesting experience. I don't want to out them, so I won't talk too much about it. But I think being able to laugh at yourself is always a good thing. What I remember talking with one person about like he was doing a prototype, and I kind of warned him away from. He was using a piece that was like represented by a yellow triangle, and I said you might want to be a little like, maybe if you're doing kind of like shy away from that a little bit, because I told him, I was like, for me as a Jew, like I immediately see that and think about the Holocaust, and it's distracting, and so he actually appreciated that feedback because it's not necessarily an association that he would have come up with, but I was like, it didn't quite mesh. I remember that was one of the first times I kind of playing Catholic Express like 6-7 years ago, something like that. So I think that's I'm sure there probably is one, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But for the most part, things have like not been thought about. I haven't yet seen too many depictions. I think the area of caution for me is if people jump to kind of the stereotype or kind of depicting if a Jewish character is. So that's the one thing I'll say. And so I love Dominion. It's one of my favorite games, but I can't help but look at like the Montebank card, the way the person is doing, and also the money changer. They both kind of look like historical kinds of depictions of like Middle Age of like how Jews were depicted, and so that's when I was like, it's a little uncomfortable, and the hairs in the back of my neck kind of stood up. And I think sometimes being aware of sometimes the broader historical culture is one of those areas of where it kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah, no, I've never seen those cards, but that's interesting that they would do that.
But you know,
Like it's not necessarily, but it kind of has a little bit.
Yeah,
and so-
but why even take the risk? Like, why?
because a lot of times people just don't even think about it until it's brought up, and then it becomes
Yeah.
a big controversy. You know, literally something we talked about in earlier episodes is the accidental mentioning of slaves inadvertently in a number of games that have happened in the past, like 5 tribes converting its slaves over to fakirs, or you know,
And
the
see,
white
then
ones
I
that
wondered
feed-
about that when they switched it to fakirs.
which
If
is,
that's offensive to Hindus.
to Hindus. Exactly. It's like
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
exactly, and then you know, sometimes people just you don't think, you don't know because the people you're depicting just might not say anything, or they might not be the target audience of your game, and you know, sometimes it's also within the artist's perception as well. Like, hey, I hadn't, you know, no idea that this would be offensive to any religion, and the designer, obviously they approve the art, but they're looking at a whole ton of art that goes along the way, so no one stops it, and then it gets released.
And I think it's also more about kind of like unintentional bias, because it's something of like where just kind of through the generations, like particularly if you just kind of look at medieval art of the people who were money changers and things like that, it was Jews did have those roles because that's what they did in medieval Europe, because that was one of the few areas where they were allowed to actually have that profession. So even if it's not necessarily intentional, if you kind of look at historic depictions, thinking about that, and it has elements of kind of this characterized kind of picture, which I really don't think that the designers meant that, and so like I still play the game and I use the cards, but it's interesting to me that it sometimes it's wary.
Interesting. All right. What would you say is the best way for a game to incorporate religion? I know we've kind of talked about it, like in like a Civ game, we've talked about reskins. Is there any other better or more meaningful way the games could do it? Do you think?
You know, I've thought about it because there's a number of games that don't want to touch even their subject matter. I was thinking recently of the Crusaders That Will Be Done game come out, and I see
Yeah, there was a controversy online about that.
yeah, big controversy about that. But I see a lot of these games that are ultimately afraid to, really tackle some religion that they don't, natively have an understanding of, and that's understandable too. It's like, what could the person who did Crusaders do the entire game from the point of the Moors getting invaded, or something of that nature? And
Probably would have been less controversial.
probably, but how do you, I would say it's something that, what most designers do is just avoid it, because almost unequivocally, almost categorically, every time that you try to involve someone else's religion or multiple religions in a situation, you offend someone, and then it brings negative attention to whatever your subject matter is, be that a board game or, non-board game related, any other sort of political means. So people tend to avoid.
It's interesting. So one of the other areas of religion board games that we didn't actually touch on yet, which I was thinking of, is you also have then like the whole category of like kind of like religion trivia games, or how they do it. So I think sometimes that's not if it's like well balanced in terms of like world religions is one way of kind of dealing with it. I would say for me, what I like for when religion is incorporated, because I like playing things with religion. Like I care a lot about religion. It's what I do with my life, and I like the subject matter, and I read about it and kind of study it and engage. Is I think if it's done seriously and not flippantly, like that's not a throwaway. That if you actually think about it as an aspect, and then when we get to our top three, I'll kind of say why I chose one of the games I did for it in terms of I like religion. If it's going to be a Civ game or something, if it actually has meaning, that it makes sense that you do this kind of step, that it helps do something, that it fills into the theme. Because I like games that are immersive for theme, and so I think that's great. Like that's one of the things I liked about Carcassonne. I thought, okay, it makes sense that you building a monastery that's surrounded by itself and kind of a cloister, like that makes sense within theme. And so that's something that's doing religion kind of right, is it's respecting the religion. And I think as long as it's come with respect, that it can work.
That was a great point. I can't top that. Okay.
You don't have to top it.
Yeah, everything must be a competition. We are gamers. All right. I guess the only other thing.
Well, one of the
did you have
things,
something else?
because we've sort of touched on it, like some of the, these are some of the best ways, and I've always felt like, because I think you had asked earlier, what are some of the worst ways you can possibly incorporate religion into a game, and I guess for me, it comes into these. The worst way you can incorporate religion into the game is just make a terrible game and then try to slap a religious theme on it. And when we were looking through the categories, there's like 900 games under the religious categories of Board Game Geek, and I would probably say 870 of them are terrible, or 0 ratings, or I didn't know this game exists, and no one else does.
I will say there was one that I looked on there. I never played it, so I can't rate it. But I was looking through the list. It's like, oh, that looked kind of interesting to me. Which was there was one on the foundation of you play the church fathers at early Christianity, and you try to get disciples and believers to your kind of ideology of working out like the basic beliefs of Christianity. But that's for me as an outsider, so I don't have weight. It's not actually the fundamentals of my faith, but I could see if someone who's actually Christian of making a game of creating, foundational doctrine could be problematic. And I think that's like the danger zone for religion. Like if you develop a good game, like something of like a cool theme like that, is you run the risk of being really, really offensive. I have a good friend another rabbi who really likes gaming. I've actually created a group in my professional organization for gaming rabbis. And his dream is to develop a good game that kind of works as a kind of Euro-style kind of game that has good content for like Judaism, because so many of the games are just, if you try to fit in too much stuff about religion, it's not a fun game. And I think that's the really hard part, is to actually make a fun game that's about religion, because it's too many purposes at once. Like most of these other games on religion are too dedicated to like educational purposes to actually be fun.
Or they're just superficial rethemes and don't really incorporate the religion. They just like change some of the text. Yeah, and that is a weird movement. Like there's a big movement on like creating a Christian game that is also a good game. And there were a few that came out that are actually pretty decent, but most of them obviously are not. But there was like it was like about Solomon something. It was basically a worker placement game that took place in like the Holy Land, and you were like building Solomon's temple or something like that. It was pretty interesting. And
there is one quick caveat though. You make some really excellent games off of dead religions, because people don't even realize that you're making something that is religious per se. Like anything dealing with, for example, Greek and Roman gods.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
No
Man,
one-
I have to change my top three. Like,
Yeah.
well, I didn't even think about.
I actually thought what your top three was going to be of the religion we're talking game you're probably play later today.
Or Egyptian gods. I mean, or Norwegian gods. I mean, these things.
Well, I was thinking of like there's like Feast of Odin and things like that, which are all religious games.
Right.
It's funny when I think of religion, I just think of the ones that are still practiced today.
No.
That's weird, but
that's exactly what we're going for. And I wanted to catch people before they said, "Well, what about all these games with dead religions?"
No, that's a good point.
I was thinking about a lot.
I might try to edit my top three before we get there. Yeah. Okay.
And I think you sort of hit on this earlier, Gideon. But how does sort of being a person who's very religious, how does that affect you with your interactions at gaming events?
So one thing I would say that I love gaming, and I joke with members of my congregation at times that it's thanks to gaming that I made my non-Jewish friends here in Houston, which is actually true. Like my social circle came from going to meetups and meeting this guy.
As did mine.
And then through him I met this guy. What I found is people were generally, when you play games, is that games allow for that icebreaker to kind of open up and have real conversations. Whether it's, I love tabletop gaming, it's that social aspect, and people are genuinely really curious about what it is. Oh, you're a rabbi, and what that means, and I get to talk about it. And sometimes you can say like, I really just like to play a game right now. But for the most part, I really enjoy it, and I found for the most part people were very respectful and very understanding, and it's been great, and it's actually one of the best things. And with it, it's then kind of fun. So, for example, like when I almost sat down for playing a game of Secret Hitler,
your personal favorite
is that people are always amused because it's a rabbi playing Secret Hitler. Which it's like things like that I find funny. I'm normally kind of more cautious about that's like usually a hot topic for me of I don't like the overuse of Nazi per se, but when fascists are depicted as lizards, it has a soft spot for me.
Yeah, I think that game is problematic in a lot of ways, but because it does it in such a funny way, it avoids a lot of the criticism you could hurl at it, although some people are still offended by it, which I totally understand. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable playing that game, then don't play it. And don't try to force your friends to play it if they're uncomfortable. But, it is what it is. I don't know.
It's still a good game, and it's actually You know, it's one of the better humorous attempts at looking at a terrible error in history. So
I would agree with that.
so there you go.
Yeah, one that hits too close to home right now. Anyway, moving on. Let's go to our top 3 games with a religious theme, and I made some last minute edits already. I might make further in a minute, but so let's start with Charles. You have a third favorite religious themed game.
All right. So I'm gonna probably go with one that's on a number of people's list as you look back on your board and things, and we'll say Biblios is one of my favorite religious themed games. It's basically about monks doing things in a monastery, different tasks that are ascribed to people. I mean, I guess what's a lot of people have played Biblios. So basically, it's a sort of a card drafting game, and you utilize it's 2 phases. One's a draft, and then one's sort of an auction phase, and you utilize that in order to gain control of one of the 5 tasks that the monks are doing, such as I think they're making pottery, they're recopying manuscripts and things of that nature, and just recruiting other monks. And at the end of the game, which is usually about 20 or 30 minutes, you see who controls the most influential area, which is tracked by dice, and whoever has the highest score wins. And this is another game that it has a deep religious theme, and you wouldn't even know about it. And the game is so good, even if it didn't have that theme, it didn't. You wouldn't care. But I do like if you read the rule book, all of the small and little things they say about the different areas. I also stole this game from Gideon because that's his number.
No, I don't know well enough. So I think for my number 3, I'm going to do it, which kind of like cheats a little bit. It's really among my favorite of trivia games, and I like it because it utilizes religion really, really well. And that's Bezer Wizard. It's one of my favorite trivia games. Which, if you haven't played Bezer Wizard, they have, I think, 20 or some other kind of number of subject matters, which each player draws out tiles. You kind of rank them of where you'll get asked your question based on the subject matter, and you can sometimes switch them around. It's actually a really good either individual or team trivia game. And one of the categories is religion and spirituality. And what I like about it is their religion and spirituality trivia questions really cover a whole gamut of things. Like, it's where I learned what kowtowing was. Literally, it's where you place your head to the ground in obedience worship, which I hadn't realized that. So it covers from Eastern religions to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So the Abrahamic faith. So that's one of the things I really like in terms of a really well of doing religion, kind of thing with respectful and kind of it's fun. So it's one of the subjects I'm kind of teasing it into the subject matter, so I put it as number 3 because I'm kind of cheating. But that's what rabbis do, is we know how to find the loopholes.
I put Biblios as well. It is an excellent game. So moving to number 2, my number 2 is Ora et Labora, which is a Uwe Rosenberg game. He put churches in like several of his games, but Ora et Labora is really focused on churches and monasteries and basically the Catholic religion. Both it has 2 basically games in it, France and Ireland, and the Ireland one's based on beer and the France one's based on wine, and yet they're still very much religion because Catholics know how to drink. So in like one, you're like you build like monasteries and you brew beer, and then the other one you have like you build chapels and things like that. But almost every building is like religious related or gives resources to these religious buildings, which produce relics, which are worth a lot of points, or wine and beer, which are worth points and can be used for other things. So I would say, even though it's somewhat abstract in the way, but all of his games are abstract because they're basically just resource conversion games, but this one I think integrates religion pretty well. So yeah, it's very good and just a very solid game mechanically. So it could have been themed to anything and it would have been good. And I think that's the key with like any kind of game. You can give it whatever theme you want. If it's a good game, it'll still be a good game. So, and I think he developed a good game, and then decided, to give it a religious theme, and it worked really well. Gideon, your number 2?
So I think my number 2 is I picked Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar game, which you're like, that doesn't sound like a religion, but I find that the temples and developing the temple track and like choosing such a central element to the game. And if you know anything about Mayan culture and civilization, the calendar was a central piece of the civilization. So throughout the game, it's all related to their religion. It's work placement and different things, but I think that it does religion respectfully. I don't know, I haven't consulted with Mayans, so they might object on some level, but I think that it tries hard to not just make it it doesn't seem to be superficial, is I think they kind of tried to delve into it of helping make like a playable mechanic, but that actually had strategy and things like that. And if you think of early religions like that, of the pre-modern religions, of where sacrifice and offerings up to the gods was a major element, I think that it does it really well. And so when I was thinking of games that incorporate religion in a really well way, I think that was definitely in my top.
Well, I love Tzolk'in so much. I did not realize that this was going to be a game. So this is actually going to be my number 2 as well. Because this is your number 1, correct?
No.
No, it's not? Okay, well, so I'll do an honorable mention of Orleans real quick. Orleans is what's the best way? It's a bag drafting game. And, I guess it has the theme of, you have monks who are sort of like wild cards who are able to do different things around the city. A number of tiles are traditional roles of monks. I think it takes place during sort of like this Renaissance in Orleans, which is led by religion as well. It's not really...
And also like the art has like a crusader on the front.
Yeah,
like,
crusader on the board. It's one of the games that's also very good. But that's sort of more of an honorable mention. Since, I love Tzolk'in so much, I have to put it in number 2. And I'll go straight to my number 1 game, which is going to be Through the Ages, A Story of Civilization, which is one of my favorite games, period. But one of the things that attracted me to the game so much is the way that it handles religions, and that is through the uses and manipulation of happy faces. In that game, you have to provide your civilization with a certain amount of happiness so that it functions. And at the beginning of the game, your main source of happiness is going to be your religion area.
Nice.
And from there on, that gives you your first happy face, and you can utilize various religious elements to build up your happiness as your population increases. The happiness sort of gets taken over by sports, but you can always build up from, I think, religion to theology to organized religion to give your happiness. And then in the game itself, they utilize religious monuments and religious leaders in order to augment points and things that you can score from the happiness that you have. Especially in like the later expansions, John Paul II is sort of like your big in all religious leader, where he doubles all the Pope John Paul II. He doubles all of your points generated by religious structures.
Nice.
And you have St. Peter's Basilica, which can double that. And you have Joan of Arc that can turn your religious strength into, or your happiness into sort of like religious zealotry and strength in order to attack other people. And I just think, you have the Parthenon to go back to ancient Greece, which doubles the points or adds an extra point to all your religion. So it's a good way by building a religious wonder to like win the game at the beginning. So incorporating all these religious monuments and people, like Michelangelo is a religion, sort of a leader. He did the Sistine Chapel, and you move on from there. And I just think it's sort of an excellent way to incorporate it into a major game, and most people, they realize it's religion. It says it right there of what it is.
I also think it's
We're
great
much of
like,
it.
to show that it evolves from religion to sports because as a religious leader, you know not to compete with like events on Sunday afternoons during football season are not going to be well attended.
Exactly.
So it's I think that's a nice honest kind of depiction of how like religion evolves at times in people's civilizations. I think that's really cool. Should I say my note?
Yes. Number one.
My number one is Battle for Souls.
Robert
I-
Buck.
I really like this game. I know some don't necessarily like it, but I like games that have a random element to them. This game is you play either heaven or hell, and you're fighting for the souls of people, and you use different things at your disposal to kind of help either tempt people to heaven or hell. It utilizes different demons, mostly from Catholicism's kind of names for the devil. It's like various demons who help, and versus various angels. So if you kind of like the structures of angels and demons, it kind of helps bring them to fruition, which I think is kind of neat. And you use different relics, and it plays with the idea of like virtue and sin. And there's a little bit of plus. What I really like is the art they used for the game was classic. It's medieval mostly, right?
Yeah. So
Classic medieval depictions for the various cards, which I really enjoy, and I like the components of it. So it's a game that's fun, and because I like whimsy, is I enjoy being the rabbi playing hell. So I find that funny in my weird kind of sense of humor. So that's probably my favorite religion game that I have.
All right. That game's terrible.
that game is not terrible. It's not terrible.
It's terrible, and the guy who made it has no morals. So, funny, ironic that we would bring him up on this episode.
What you have personal experience with Robert Burke? I'm curious now.
You know the story. Anyway, I'll remind you after.
Okay.
But
Story time on a different day.
yeah.
I think I do remember.
So my favorite, I cheated in a way. I was trying to think of Greek things, and there are many games with Greek mythology that I really enjoy, but none that would quite make the list. So I put a game with fake religions, but to me, of all the games I played, it incorporated religion into the theme the most, and that is Chaos in the Overworld. In that game, you play God, and so right away, religion, because you are a god and you're representing basically a religious cult, and you send your cultists out into the world to corrupt it and kind of bring it around. Now, if you used, it's essentially an area control game with combat. So if you use this theme with real religions, or use this game mechanic with real religions, it would probably be pretty offensive, because you're basically like trying to stomp out the other religions and make your religion like the number one religion in the land. But using it in the abstract with these fake religions, it's just super fun. Like you have one god represents violence, one god represents gluttony, one god represents greed, and the other one represents lust, and you're basically just fighting it out to corrupt the world and corrupt it fastest, but to corrupt it in your specific way. And all the cards are basically themed, and all the attacks and things are themed very thematically with your god and with your philosophy. So even though it's not real religion, I feel like of all the games that I could think of that incorporate religion, it did it in the most authentic way, because it really seems like you're representing a belief and a philosophy, just because of the mechanics of the game are built around that philosophy. So.
And out of print.
See, I thought you would have picked Spirit Island.
Well, yeah,
Would that be at least runner up for you? I think that's a very good
Yeah, and it's. I was wavering on it. That is one of the first games I thought of when I thought of this episode, but because we don't talk about Spirit Island enough on this podcast.
You think?
But in that game, you're really more of a nature spirit, and I guess the Dahan worship you. I don't know. None of the cards really reference that much, and also a lot of the times you kill the Dahan, so It's the Dahan of the natives, by the way.
It's like the old gods, man.
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
classic depiction of like classic
Yeah. No, I
early
definitely
pagan gods.
I
Just,
definitely see why you would think that, but I don't know. I don't feel like I'm representing a religion, whereas like in Chaos, I feel like I'm representing a religion. When I'm playing Spirit Island, I feel like I'm a nature spirit who's really upset that these settlers are on my island, and I just want to kill them.
Okay.
So I didn't get much religion from that, but I like when Chaos, I feel like I'm playing a religion, and I'm trying to convince the world that my religion is the way to go, or burn it all down around me if they don't convert. So I don't know. That's
Yeah.
why.
It's a war game, Trey. I mean, oh well. I won't say anything
Let's see,
more.
that's no. I see. I kind of like that kind of stuff, and like that's why like when I was looking at that list, I want to try to find the name of the one.
I mean,
of the early
but
kind of church one that I was like, oh, that sounds like a lot of fun.
however, I will say this: these were not the easiest top 10s to make because we were looking at lists of some interestingly named games such as Expulsion, Jewish Life in Spain from the Golden Age to 1492.
That one I'm actually curious about.
Feast and Famine, The First Jihad. I mean, we had a good discussion about
I
these.
do have like my worst religion game.
Oh, really? I'm
Which
ready.
is it's actually my worst like Jewish themed game, which I just couldn't stand. It's this game called Tradition. It's a trivia Jewish game from like the 70s. I think I have like 3 copies of it now in my synagogue, and it is just atrocious. It's like not well written kind of trivia. It's a weird, obscure kind of stuff that's not like fun. And I love trivia games. Like you can ask people like I'm a bit of a trivia, and it's just really bad. And so that to me, I kind of epitomizes like some of the worst of the religion games, which is that we're just gonna try to do a bunch of stuff and do it not well, and like it to me just epitomizes like the worst kind of things. Is just because it sends a message that religion's not fun, and like I actually think that religion has a lot of fun aspects to it. So even if something is sometimes a bit satirical, like say the Cards Against Humanity, like Jupac, I take that in stride because it's done. It's a respectful kind of way. To be clever well, you have to actually have respect for it. It's some of the commentary I heard from some Mormons about the musical Book of Mormon, which is that in order for the playwrights to write that musical well enough, is they actually had to like study deeply, like the actual tenets of the faith of Latter-day Saints to really make the obscure references that are like kind of like candy for people that actually are knowledgeable.
But luckily, the creators of South Park go the extra mile.
They do.
Indeed. All right, are we ready for recent games?
All right.
Charles, you want to kick us off?
I'm trying to remember where exactly we left off with our last list of games, and I see that on your list you put the Pandemic Season 2 update. So let's kick off with that.
We can kick off with that. Yeah, so we're over halfway through now, I think, or about halfway. And yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I've been comparing it to Season 1 a lot, and to me, I don't think it's as good as Season 1. But I'm still enjoying the game. I'm still enjoying the journey. But without giving away too many spoilers, in Season 1, you spend most of the time, like, making changes to the world. But in Season 2, you spend a lot of time and effort making changes to something else that's not necessarily the world map. But I won't get into spoilers because you kind of figure it out as you go along. But making changes to this other thing is not as interesting as making changes to the world map that you do a lot in Season 1. I mean, you still do some changes in Season 2, but they're not as frequent. And they're bigger things in Season 2, because I'm sure you know this is not a spoiler. There's an exploration factor in Season 2, and that is, so you're making bigger changes, but they're way rarer, right? You're not constantly making changes to the world map as you are in Season 1. So, to me...
Or if you are, you have to sort of measure it because, you just like in the original Season 1, you have a certain number of objectives that you have to reach. And some of the common objectives are make this change to the map, and you're
That's
just
true.
like, all right, I need to slow down now because if I burn through this, if I do too many changes, then I'm going to not be able to easily accomplish this objective in the next month that I play.
That is true. You have a lot of abilities to make changes to the map. You don't necessarily have a lot of time to make those changes because you have other stuff that is more pressing. And to me, not quite as interesting. I'm still enjoying the game. I just don't think it's as good as Season 1 currently.
And let's be honest, we got punished for doing what the game sort of incentivizes you to do.
Yeah, we were a little salty about that. But now, it's almost like it switched because it was, I feel like, too difficult. And again, we were just doing what the game kind of pushed us to do, and we got punished for it. But now that we've kind of got past that hump, it's almost too easy. Like, we weren't really in much danger of losing the last, 3 games or so. So it's like...
Yeah, but when we punish, we almost, did the awful and got the bailout. We almost opened the bailout pack.
Yeah, that's true.
But luckily, we were able to... we spent 3 games trying to recover from following the incentives. And I don't know if I did not enjoy that portion of it at all. Now that we've worked our way back, I'm enjoying it a lot more. Luckily, I will say it has not yet come to the death that was Seafall when it reached its, I would say its 66% point.
Yeah, no, it's still way better than Seafall, don't get me wrong.
So,
I still have it ranked like a 8, I think, on BGG. So,
what?
Season 2.
Oh, Season 2? Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your Seafall rank at?
I gave it a 7 because it started off as like a 9 and it ended up at like a 3, so I split the difference and rounded up.
All right.
Gideon, have you played anything recently? Anything
This is gonna sound like it's just a plug, but I've literally been playing Harvest.
He's so good at Harvest!
An immense amount. Actually, I'm not just saying because I'm sitting next to the game designer.
He's really good.
I really, really like this game. It actually fits the sweet spot of like my favorite types of games, which is that it has the playability that you can play with hardcore gamers and also not as sophisticated gamers, and also can play across generations. And it has whimsy, which is a major thing that I really like, and replayability. So that's what I've actually been playing, and that's what I played like yesterday, and Monday I played like a couple hours worth of it. So so that's the main game that I've been playing most recently.
Not to mention, we did have the Harvest release party, small, personal, intimate release party, and you did win.
Yes.
The Harvest release party. I believe the only person you lost to is at this table, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not bad. Not bad.
Yeah.
Cool. And now I'm very proud to own 2 sets of Harvest.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I do. Again, I give a lot of credit to TMG and Seth Jaffe who helped develop it, and that company just did an amazing job with that game. So, again, shout out to TMG. I have been inducted to a cult that many of you have joined recently, and that is the cult of Gloomhaven. I played it for the first time last night, and there's so much hype around it. I was like, can it meet the hype? Can it meet the hype? And when I first started playing it, I was like, this is good, but I don't think it meets the hype. But I'm having that same effect as I get almost any time I play a Legacy game, is that I can't stop thinking about it. Like, after I was done playing it last night, I thought about it all last night. I thought about it all day today, and I just can't wait to get back into the game and start exploring it more and opening more things and trying different characters. It's just
So you're swiping right on Tinder?
I'm swiping right on Gloomhaven. Again, this is first impressions. I only played it twice and it was both last night. But yeah, the game is just solid mechanically, and after more of us play it, I'm sure we'll talk more about it on this podcast. But yeah, if you get a chance, buy 2nd edition. It's well worth the cost. I mean, put it to you this way: there's about 200 to 300 hours of gameplay in that box. Whereas like Pandemic Legacy, which is only like $30 cheaper, there's only 12 to 24 games worth. So that's
72 hours of gameplay.
At most.
No.
In Pandemic Legacy Season 2? No.
72 would be very high, yeah.
Yeah, that would be very high. If you beat it in 12 games, which I'm guessing some people will, you might get 36 hours, But again, Gloomhaven is like $30 more, and it's 300 hours of gameplay in that box. It's just amazing. Like, I don't even know if I'll ever finish it. At some point, maybe I'll just get tired of it and but I'm a completionist, so there's a good chance that I'll play through all 300 hours. So we'll see. But yeah, amazing game. Check it out. Charles, you got anything else?
I still have some of the games from BGG.
Yeah, so do I. We can start talking about them.
So let's see. Did we talk about Numsford last time? The new UA Rosenberg game or not?
Oh, yeah, Ben talked about it.
Yeah, Ben. Yeah, we did talk about it. All right.
But you got a chance to play it?
Oh, well, I played with Ben, so Ben really hated it. I think we talked about it there. So I'm gonna go to something that I've actually played recently, which is called Welcome to Centerville. Welcome to Centerville is a city building game from GMT Games from designer Chad Jensen, who is the designer of Dominant Species.
How have I not heard of this game?
Because it just came out on its Ship 500, and Jeffrey got it because he loves GMT.
That is a pedigree right there.
Yes.
Chad Jensen, that's a Dominant Species.
So, Chad Jensen is basically a war gamer, and he makes war games most of the time, but every now and then he'll
He's like,
pop out
Euro
a classic
game.
Euro game. This game is very good. It is, the mechanic is Yahtzee style dice selection. So it plays in about an hour. Much to Jeffrey's chagrin, we played with some AP people, so our first game took 2.5 hours. But it should take about an hour.
Oh, no.
Basically, what you do is you roll dice, and they're 6-sided die, and you affect one of 6 areas on the board. The game itself is you are trying to push up a income track and I believe it's a celebrity track or something of that nature. And whichever is the lowest score of the two is your score at the end of the game. Different areas of the board, sort of like you have 2 housing complexes. Two of the 4 will raise your income. 2 of the 4 will raise your celebrity. And there's a lot of different areas you can go to. You can gain political office, you can gain status and prestige, you can build oceanfront property, you can build like a bridge, which gives you sort of a temporary boost to both. And it's incorporating all these things with the Yahtzee type mechanic, and it worked very, very well. I would say this is, sort of like Super Suburbia in terms of what happens. There's, like I said, there's area control, there's office control. It just played really well, and it should actually be able to be played in probably about 15 to 20 minutes per player with experienced players. First game might take 90 minutes. I don't expect anyone ever to take the 2.5 hours that our game took, but it may.
Very cool. Gideon, did you have any more?
Last week I had the chance to first play Clans of Caledonia for the first time, and I really enjoyed that game. One, I like cool chits. It's something that I enjoy of games, and this game's use of all kinds of different resource kind of things and picks is really nice. I liked the kind of variability of different kind of powers, which was kind of neat for the different clans. And even though I lost terribly in my first game, I had a really, really good time, and to me that's a sign of a game that I really like, because I lose horribly and want to keep playing. Like, that means I want to keep playing it, so I really enjoyed that, and so I look forward to playing that more.
Very cool. Yeah, and I will also talk about Clans, because I've been trying to talk about it for 2 months. I played it 2 months ago, but we've just had so many other games to talk about on the BGG episode and whatnot, so I got a chance to play it, and I really enjoyed it as well. A lot of people compare it to Terra Mystica. I see some similarities there, but to me it feels quite a bit different, except for the whole, like, you reveal, as you build things on the map, you reveal things on your board, and that becomes your income. That part is the same, but everything else is fairly different. But Terra Mystica is my favorite game, and this game is also very good. I don't think it's going to dethrone Terra Mystica. To me, it's not as interesting, the whole, like, economic aspect, like messing around with the market prices and things like that. To me, that's just not as interesting as, building your territory out, which is, really the main thing you're doing in Terra Mystica is like building territory and trying to get the largest area and spreading and manipulating the cult track is a little bit, but even that is not as, to me, fiddly as messing with this market in Clans. But I still very much enjoyed the game and would happily play it again.
Well, you haven't played Clans 4-player yet, have you?
No, I've not.
Yes, this becomes like as aggressive territorially as Terra Mystica gets.
Yeah,
in
no,
a
I mean,
4-player game.
I still felt that even in a
And-
2-player game of Clans, but I don't know, it just to me it just didn't seem as interesting.
Yeah. I spoke about Clans before. I do think it is a very good game. I feel that it was inspired by Terra Mystica, and I feel that out the box, it just has way more playable races than Terra Mystica, more balanced at least, because they're all broken. But
And yet, every time they play it, someone's complaining about a race being overpowered
in what?
in Clans. Yeah,
No, actually, I found them all
I've
to
heard the
have.
discussions.
I have found them all to be like very good in their own way, and there's clearly of the I think 8, 9 races if you get the or clans if you get the Kickstarter, they are 7. I think even the one people think is not that good is very playable as well. So a lot of it is it's just a really good game.
But Charles has played like 300 games of Terra Mystica. Is he ever going to play 300 games of Clans? No, because
I
it's
have
not as
played-
good.
No.
It's just the new kid on the block.
No.
That's all it is.
I have played now. I've gotten my Clans games up. I've played 20 games of Clans.
That's good. Not
I'm
close to 300.
I'm making
But
my way.
progress.
But I stopped playing Daily Terra Mystica because of Clans. So there you go.
Yes. I'm just saying, if you play 300 games of Clans and you still think it's a better game, that is the time I will believe you.
Hey man, I'm on my 150 games of Terraforming Mars. So
No, Terraforming, yeah, I can definitely, if you told me Terraforming Mars is better than Terra Mystica, I would believe you, but I just feel like you haven't explored Clans to the depth you've explored Terra Mystica, because Terra Mystica is such a deep game, and Clans might be as well, who knows. I'd definitely like to explore Clans more. I'd probably be more excited to play Clans than Terra Mystica, but like Charles, I've played over 100 games of Terra Mystica, so it's just like, oh, something new and shiny to explore and experience. So,
but none of us have the same feeling about Gaia Project.
I really want to buy it, but it's so expensive, and I already own a superior game, which is called Terra Mystica, and it's basically the same thing.
I have Clans. So is it out? Did it finally
Yeah,
release?
it's out.
Okay.
But I'll probably break down and buy it one day, just for the variability. But
What is it?
yeah.
What did it release at? What's the MSRP?
I'm sure
89.
it's 100 MSRP and probably sells for 80. But
Great.
yeah. So one day, a Christmas present to myself, maybe next year. Anyway, I guess we should wrap it up because people are arriving for gaming. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We're on YouTube and Twitter at Eternally Bored, and our website is www.eternallybored.com. In all iterations of that, it's bored as in board games, and there's no underscore or spaces. So until next time, we're eternally bored, so you don't have to be. Thank you.
Yeah. Ian, come turn this off. Jordy, let's get over here. Bob Barker says, come on down. We're up for a pricing game, and that is the game. So, ladies and gentlemen, what will we be playing today?
I don't know, is Jeremy coming at 3 or is he coming
He
at...
said he was planning to come earlier.
Okay. Yeah, he's still
doubt
not
it.
here, and it's quite after 3.
Guys,
How about Magic Caledonia?
How's it going? We have 5. But I'm happy to split off to 2 players Gloomhaven.
Who did you play with, Sasha? Or?
Yeah, I played with Sasha.
I've been wanting to play Gloomhaven.
I'd also happily if it can be played. I'd happily learn how to play Gloomhaven.
I got delicious treats for everybody. These are awesome, homemade, and then these are also homemade. Yeah, not by me,
Yeah.
not by me. But
Chocolate, peanut butter.
these are chocolate peanut butter. Those are just awesome candy
That's-
pecans.
Those sound amazing.
Oh my god!
Yeah, I know, right?
That's so good!
Yeah. It's my contribution.
Thank you, sir.
I was going to
Candy
contribution.
pecan.
Well, I mostly have alcohol to pay you back, so
That is
enjoy
fine.
whatever alcohol you would like.
How you doing, Dre? Good to see you, man.
Yeah. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
It's only been a few months
I
instead
didn't
of our
realize you
usual
didn't
6 months between seeing each
I
other.
know.
I like
Yeah.
your
Well,
shirt.
Thank you. Yeah.
I
my
have
wife
medical
got it
and
for
religious
me.
reasons, so.
You need to get the sweater version.
I know.
It already looks like a sweater
I
pattern.
know. It needs to be
Well,
like
that's not a sweater.
no. It's just a T-shirt that looks like a sweater.
That looks like
it
Needle
needs to
Point.
be a sweater, 100%. I want to